Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Jurassic Zoological Garden, and today we are going to build a very cute and lush habitat for the Oviraptor. So let's get started. And a little heads up before we jump into today's episode, I just wanted to quickly let you know that in case you have missed it, I have opened my own Discord server. So if you want to join my community on there and chat with me, get sneak peeks for the next episodes, and generally share everything about the games that we are playing on my YouTube account. So go down into the description of this video and find the link to my Discord server. I would really be happy if you guys join my server. But now let's start talking about today's episode and the Oviraptor. When I started filming, or basically even before I started filming, and I was thinking about what to build next for in the current zoo, I was firstly kind of placing the last bit of the pathing, so I know exactly what areas I need to fill in with habitats and other stuff before I can finally finish this project. And I also was looking at Pinterest for some inspirational picture, and at the time I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to build for next in this zoo, so I was kind of just looking generally at zoo habitats, and I found one picture that immediately caught my eye, and it was a relatively simple but really cute habitat that I'm trying to recreate here. And in this picture it was a habitat for meerkats. I think, at least I believe so, that it was meerkats or something similar. So it was basically this almost rectangular habitat that was a little bit sunken in, then the glass barrier in front with a little bit of soil and plants in the front of the glass barrier, and then the habitat with a little bit of greenery, just a few trees, and then also some more drier areas, especially for meerkats, as they like to dig around. They had some areas where they could definitely dig around and build their little underground homes and tunnels and stuff like that. So I really loved this image of this picture, and especially how the foliage looked in the habitat, so I wanted to recreate this as good as possible. So I then got back to the game and started looking at all the different dinosaurs that we have in this game, and I thought we don't really have a matching dinosaur that could be similar to a meerkat, so I was just looking at smaller species that could be fitting for this kind of habitat, especially for the size. And I came across the Oviraptor because I originally already thought about building for it at some point, but I then decided to build for the Ornithomimus because I wanted to build for something a little bit bigger. But now that I had this specific habitat that I wanted to recreate, I definitely needed a quite small species. So I did go back to the Oviraptor and actually build for this one. And I feel like this habitat is perfectly for this little dinosaur. It just looks really cute. It's not like a dangerous dinosaur, so I feel like the relatively low barriers are also quite fitting for this one. So I believe that this is a really naturalistic and also quite realistic habitat for the Oviraptor. So what I did to kind of recreate what I saw, I firstly started with the barrier, and for this one I started to place down one concrete wall that is on the grid, because I feel like since this habitat is almost rectangular, I feel like working on the grid does help quite a lot. I know from, at least from Planet Zoo, that a lot of people did not like the gridded pieces, but I feel like sometimes they can be extremely helpful, and especially for this habitat too, it was quite helpful. And by also sometimes splitting certain things from the group and making them on their own, you can still place them with the advanced move, so you are a little bit more flexible, and I definitely feel like this helped a lot. And I did use the grid a lot with this habitat, as it is really, yeah, almost rectangular, as said before. So that everything fits, I used this one gridded piece and then started building this one piece of barrier that I'm gonna duplicate all around. So I placed down the glass floor to use as the glass barrier. Unfortunately, this is still the only glass piece that we have, and feel like we can definitely work with it, but I would love to have a couple more glass pieces that are actually see-through glass in this game. So I then also placed the soil in front and also made this little, almost like a fence barrier, which is really low. I just use that to kind of separate the soil or the planters from the gas path, but the main barrier is definitely the concrete wall and the glass piece at the top. And then I just duplicated it all around so it will be extremely straight and really fits. And then for the pieces that I at a 45-degree angle, I did split them from the group and basically made them fit with the advanced move, so it does look really smooth. And then for the back wall, I also used a brick wall. I tried to be as close as possible to the inspirational picture that I took, and they also had some sort of brick wall in the back, which does look quite artificial, but I don't really mind that too much. I don't feel like every habitat needs to be super like naturalistic and you don't have to see any like buildings or stuff like that, because I feel like in realistic zoos you will be seeing brick walls, concrete walls, you will see buildings in the background and stuff like that. So basically artificial stuff or man-made stuff, and not everything looks like it's coming from the wild or stuff like that. So I don't mind this at all, especially since I am building in a quite realistic style. So I feel like this definitely fits a lot. And then I kind of tweaked the building in the back that serves as a housing for the animals. They can like go there through a tunnel, maybe under the planters. And now that I'm talking about it, I actually forgot to add a animal door or a dinosaur door so that they can actually enter the building. So I completely forgot about that. But yeah, I can still add that later. That won't be like any problem at all. And it can also be used for the staff to like prepare their food, to store stuff and anything like that. And I wanted to keep this building also quite simple, as in the inspirational picture the building itself was also extremely simple, and I wanted to make it look like also not super like high quality modern or stuff like that. So I used a, I believe, concrete piece with these little lines so you can see the different segments of the walls actually, and I'm completely fine with that. I normally don't really use these pieces a lot, but honestly, they don't look that bad. It just depends on the style that you're building in, but they are still really usable for a lot of times. And then I just added a couple more details like on the roof and some windows and this little trim for the roofing. And I also made a very flat roof so it doesn't stick out too much the building, but you can still see it. And then in order to hide it just a little bit more so it doesn't look like everything just concrete and bricks, I decided to also place a planter in between the habitat and the building itself, so it is a little bit more covered, but you can still see the building in the background. And then also from the back side, the staff will be able to enter the habitat through this little door, which I added into this wall with a glass piece on the side, so that they can also actually see if there would be like a dinosaur right at the front of the door, so they can't like sneak out while the staff is getting inside. And then also for the back of the habitat, I didn't really do anything too much there because I don't really pay attention too much for the backstage pieces or areas in general. So I just place a little bit here and there, but other than that, I placed down or used the terrain brush to just fill in this area in the background. And I also don't do like a whole barrier around the whole zoo, which should be typical, I believe, for zoos, so that no one can just like walk through the forest and actually access the zoo. So there should be some sort of barrier to keep like people and animals out and stuff like that. But I'm not doing this for the zoo, as I don't want to go completely overboard with this project, as I do want to finish this relatively fast so I can start a new project that will be much more realistic and much more detailed in the future, because at the moment I'm definitely getting much more into the flow of building, which was a little bit of a problem some weeks ago when I firstly started building again in Jurassic World Evolution 3, because I had a break of, I believe, 8 months, and I did feel quite rusty after playing again after 8 months. because in those 8 months I have not played Jurassic World Evolution 3, I have not played Planet Zoo, so modular building was absolutely not on my agenda in this time, so I did feel quite rusty. So you can also quite tell this with some of the habitats I've built in the time, and so I don't want to go too overboard with this whole project and finish this, and with the next one I can go like quite crazy with the details, because I am definitely getting much more comfortable now with playing basically in the style as I did with Planet Zoo when I still played it, and definitely be more realistic and more detailed, and also the little stuff around that is not directly connected to the habitats, like the areas in between the backstage areas, the staff areas and stuff like that. So I definitely want to pay more attention to that in the next project. And for the inside of the habitat, or the whole rock work and foliage work I did, I actually switched up the rocks that I use, because in the last couple of episodes I have entirely only used the tropical rocks. So I did use a different one now. It is, I believe, the Savannah rock or desert rock. I'm not quite sure what the name was, but it's basically a much lighter color, but still like a little bit brownish, even maybe a little bit reddish. And I just wanted to switch it up so not every habitat looks quite the same. So I also remade this little rock group with the grasses in between for this type of rock, because I only had this now for the tropical rocks. So I kind of redid this now so I could use it in this habitat and it would still fit. So right at the beginning I basically always start with the rock work, so I can basically lay down the foundation of this whole habitat and kind of make the design or the layout of the habitat, and then start with all the different stuff. So I basically placed down some larger rocks, but I did not go too overboard with them, since the Oviraptor is quite small and I didn't want to disturb their traversable area too much. Because also what I found out is, for these big rocks that I love to use and that I'm sinking down into the ground quite a lot, because I'm only using a rather small portion of this rock actually to be visible. If you lower the rock down into the ground, the dinosaurs will still not be able to walk over this rock, because they generally do not walk over rocks, and even if it is underground they still can't walk over this area. So I actually need to turn off the collision so that they can still use this area, and especially with such a small dinosaur I wanted to have them a lot of traversable area, since also the habitat is relatively small, so they can use a lot of it. So I turned off the collision for the rocks, so that they can still walk over it, and so that they don't glitch too much through the rocks. I basically try to keep it as low as possible with the big rocks. And then with the help of the rocks that help me kind of decide what the layout is going to be, I use the terrain brushes to kind of make some drier areas and also some more lush and more foliage dense areas. And I definitely wanted to have some of the grasses that we have with the foliage brushes, as we don't really have a really nice like regular grass piece in the foliage tab. So this definitely also helped to already get some of the foliage in there. And then something different that really stood out to me from the inspirational picture that I took is that they had these two specific trees in there. So on the left side they had a quite skinny tree, I just say it, with only foliage at the very top, and then basically almost in the middle of the habitat they had this quite low and really bushy, almost round tree. Maybe it was also a very very large bush, I'm not quite sure, but I used a tree for this one, and I just really liked the design of the habitat that I took as inspiration. So I definitely wanted to recreate that, and definitely had to use these two very sticking out trees that really caught my eye. So I kind of tried to recreate that and use the string tree on the left side, and in the middle I tried to find a tree that was quite small and also as round as possible. And I think I even scaled this down a little bit more because most of the trees that we have are quite ginormous, but I feel like this really fits in there. And from there on I basically started placing around all these smaller types of foliage in the habitat. From the inspiration, it was really almost only grasses and some nettle and stuff like that, and also some type of grass that has these like fluffy really light pieces. So I use these semi-aquatic plants that we have to kind of mimic this look. And then surely I also placed around some of broken trees and tree stumps all around, because I feel like they always look good in habitats, and they just give it a little bit more structure and more detail. So I tried to stick to the foliage brush, how I place it. So everywhere where it was quite green, I also tried to use a lot of very green foliage and make these areas as lush as possible. And on these little bit more drier and earthier areas, I try to use a little bit less foliage, and also some foliage that also looks a little bit more dry. For example, these bushes that are basically only the skeleton of the bush and they don't have any more leaves on them. And also the ferns, because we have these like yellowish greenish ferns, and also some that are more like yellowish brownish, maybe even a little bit reddish, so they do look a little bit more dried up. And I also use these in those area. I still use a little bit of green foliage in these dry areas, so it doesn't look too weird, but I feel like this perfectly matches the whole vibe that I was going for. So the drier areas could be used for a little bit of digging or looking for food, and then these really lush areas are for hiding and just chilling for the dinosaurs. And then to basically finish off this whole habitat, I placed down a bunch of decals all around the habitat, or basically on the walls of the barriers, so to kind of mimic some dirt and that they are a little bit old and withered and stuff like that. So I really love to use those dirt decals, especially on the walls, sometimes even on the glasses, so they look used, because I feel like not using any decals and not going completely overboard with all those little details, some habitats can look a little bit too curated, too perfect, I would say. So just adding a little bit of dirt, maybe even those like cracked concrete pieces or some damaged pieces, so they actually look used and old, and also definitely realistic. This really does give the last little bit of detail and a little bit more soul to the habitats by using the decals, and I absolutely like to use them, and I definitely need to use them even more in the next habitat, so they just look as realistic as possible. Because personally, when I go to the zoo, I've never seen a perfectly like curated or perfectly clean habitat at all, because of course there's plants around, there's dirt, there's animals or dinosaurs digging around and just making dirt everywhere, and I don't think that staff would even clean off those walls too regularly. So this definitely is the last little detail for realism. And then at the very end, I just placed down a couple of foliage pieces in this little soil bed that we made, and I tried to stick mostly to the same foliage that we also have inside the habitat, so it does look quite cohesive. And then off camera, I basically finished off this whole area and all those little pieces in between, so everything looks perfectly neat. And this is the finished result for the Oviraptor habitat. I hope you enjoyed this video and how I designed this habitat for the Oviraptor. So definitely leave a like for this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more videos that are about to come for Jurassic World Evolution 3. Leave a comment down below to let me know what you want to see for the next episode of Jurassic Zoological Garden, and I'm gonna leave you now with the last cinematic shot so you can enjoy the finished result of the Oviraptor habitat. I hope to see you in the next episode, and until then, bye guys!